Hello everyone and welcome to today's Mondac webinar in association with GVZH. This webinar brings together key players in the fintech sector to discuss how Malta can provide a competitive environment for fintech companies, especially when addressing the challenges that may arise when dealing with regulatory changes. My name is Dan Sampaio and I'm joined by a brilliant panel to take us through today's discussion. Andrew Zammit is one of the firm's partners and is actively involved in mergers and acquisitions, corporate finance, licensing of financial services, businesses within the Malta Financial Services Authority, and banking and finance transactions. He has a passion for businesses within the TMT and fintech space, having pioneered the licensing of various fintech and online gaming operators in Malta and leading various corporate acquisitions, including the sale of Malta's largest quad telecoms player and many significant acquisitions within the online gaming sector. Alan Cuschieri is the co-CEO of Kalamata Cuschieri Finance Group and founder of Moneybase, Malta's award-winning and first digital payments platform. With over 20 years of experience in financial services, Alan played a key role in growing a boutique investment advisory business to a diversified financial services group of 6 companies with 200 employees present in 3 countries. And Sandro Bianco is a highly entrepreneurial senior executive professional with over 25 years of experience in executive leadership positions. Throughout his years of experience as a well-seasoned strategist, he has held executive board directorships on numerous companies and in various aspects and roles of top management, specializing in the fintech space with companies licensed in Europe and the USA, amongst others. Now, before I hand over to the panel to begin today's webinar, a housekeeping item. You can submit questions to our panel by typing them into the questions pane of the toolbar on the right-hand side of your page. We will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible during our Q&A and throughout, but please do reach out for any additional information that you may require. It's now my pleasure to hand you over to Andrew, Alan and Sandro to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for the kind introduction and for organising the webinar. Thank you, Mondac. I'm very privileged to have Sandro and Alan with me today to discuss more specifically than just how Malta can be used as a, how to harness the possibilities of Malta as an open regulatory framework. We want to focus on specifically the fintech area, particularly to the payment services space, which is where Sandro and Alan are both very active. So let's start off with a brief introduction. I mean, I want this to unfold as a bit of a fireside chat, focus on a bit of considerations of the regulatory environment, the challenges you're facing. We'll touch upon the vision for the future, how we're seeing payment services evolve. Possibly bring in blockchain and smart contracts, which is something that is evolving very quick and could affect the payment services industry, and even consider some of the regulatory developments we're seeing around us. So just as a basic introduction, I mean, Dan's made his kind introductions, but if you can, Sandro, we can start from you. If you can just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, your company, and your positioning in the marketplace. Not that eToro needs much introduction, but maybe you can walk us through a little bit how you're positioned in the market.
Sure, Anne. Thanks for the intro. Well, basically, as Dan was pointing out, I've been around for quite a few years, and especially, specialize in the fintech space. I've run anything from credit institution to brokerages, licensed MSBs in the US, e-wallets, mobile money, IBAN issuance. Quite a few and diverse things in the payment sphere. I've been lucky enough to work both in Malta, but also in other licensed jurisdictions. Ranging from ASEC in Australia to the US, and obviously the Maltese jurisdiction. So, I'd like to bring a perspective of not only, having dealt locally on the market in Malta and passporting across Europe, but also across the globe.
Okay, thank you, Sandro. And in terms of eToro's presence in Malta, can you give us a little bit of context of why eToro based itself in Malta for its money services and how that fits in with the overall strategy within the group. You can just maybe elaborate a little bit on that for our audience's benefit.
Well, on a brief line, I mean, eToro is licensed as an e-money institution over in Malta. And basically what we do through here is we service our clientele in Europe, whereby we can issue IBANs and provide them with a wallet service, which directly integrates to our trading platform. It streamlines the process for a client. We offer faster access to their funds, easier and better methodology in order to both top up and pay out from the IBAN directly into their bank accounts. We have launched last year, and we finalized the launch across Europe by the end of December last year as well. We've seen a very, very nice uptake of the business, and the clients seem pretty happy with the product they're being offered. Malta as a jurisdiction has in itself, offered itself to be pretty pragmatic, understanding our business model. The MFSA has been very open to discussions with us. And in essence, we have been working hand in hand with them in order to make sure that the product is servicing appropriately all the requirements within the financial sector.
Thank you. That's insightful. And I turn to you from the angle where Moneybase being a homegrown, if you like, homegrown institution. Can you give us a little bit of context of, again, introduction to Moneybase, what it does, how it's positioned in the market, and a little bit of your journey in Malta?
Yeah. Sure. So first of all, thank you, and hello everyone. Well, we've been in fintech since 2004, so we've been building our own core banking systems, our trading platforms, later on the electronic money institution, as you know, the financial institution, and Moneybase is quite diverse. We do investments, stocks, bonds, funds, equities, and more recently we've added on as well the IBAN, but more than the IBAN also we do third-party transfers, so we are essentially facilitating SEPA transfers across 34 countries. We have a multi-currency MasterCard as well, so we have a multi-currency wallet. So Moneybase is a quite diverse offering. It's based in Malta, but we offer our services across Europe, and that's it in a nutshell, basically, what we do.
We were happily part of your journey to watching you build up, a core banking system, and watching you really take the business into a fully technology empowered organization. How do you see, I mean, you've come all this way over the past years. How do you see the fintech space evolving, particularly in the payment services area in Malta, from where you're standing?
When we're talking about Malta, there's a lot going on in Malta at the moment. I think it's a very positive vibe in Malta at the moment. First of all, the strategic document announced by the MFSA puts fintech really on the roadmap, where they have committed and they have announced their vision for Malta to become a fintech hub, an international fintech hub, which is good for the industry, it's good for Malta. It's very positive for us operating here to be part of this. So that's very positive. Apart from that, there were other initiatives from the MFSA. For example, the central bank has launched Europay, which allows financial institutions to connect and to make payments to Euro payments through the central bank. The MFSA has launched a second version of their sandbox, the updated version of their sandbox, where they're encouraging startups to innovate and to be disruptive. The government is working to launch Malta's first VC fund in partnership with the European Investment Fund. McKinsey has done research on Europe and fintechs in Europe, and Malta has emerged as one of the leading fintech-friendly and spaces where fintech can grow. Companies like MasterCard have committed that so they want to grow in the space, especially in the fintech space in Malta. There's Finance Malta and Malta Enterprise that are providing support for companies who are coming to Malta. So all in all, there's a lot happening in the fintech space, and there seems to be growing momentum. So I think it's a very exciting time to be here in Malta, and we look forward to the industry growing here, because ultimately, as it grows, I think we all stand to benefit.
Yeah, and the truth is that even through your journey, you also consider, even though you are homegrown as an organization and you've been established for 50 years, it's also true that you went through a process of considering other jurisdictions before you came to the obvious choice of Malta. Can you just give us, just a bit of insight into, why did you look beyond the shores of Malta, and what made you fall back onto choosing here as your place to work?
So yes, I mean, we have a license that is a fund administration license in Luxembourg. We had a software company that we set up just for recruitment purposes, but that we could have used it as a stepping stone in Lithuania. We considered Ireland, and we also considered the Netherlands, because we also have connections over there. But all in all, I would say that Malta is very well set up. First of all, they have a centralized regulator for investments and payments, which for us was very important, because at the end of the day, we're trying to provide a place where people and eventually even businesses can manage their wealth in total, their payments and their investments. And all in all, I think Malta was the place where sort of, the regulator is balanced, the cost of doing business is balanced, and when you weigh everything, the answer was quite clear for us. So, but we did consider quite a few jurisdictions before we actually, it was a 4-year project. We weren't in a massive hurry to get, although we did it quite swiftly to get the license, because there was a lot of development to be done. So we really wanted to make sure that this is a decision that, we do properly, and then eventually we could scale up into Europe anyway, because we could passport our services across Europe, which now we have done, obviously, and we offer services across the EU. So
thank you.
Say that was
quite the journey.
One thing I can add to this point as well is that sort of at that point the MFSA is, they have their analysts, the fintech analysts that they assign, and there are questions going on over there. I think the MFSA are looking for solid companies, reputable companies that are very professional and adhere to the highest standards. But then once they see that, they're also very approachable and very open to discussion, which is nice. So I would say we had a very positive experience with the MFSA.
I'm sure the regulator will be happy to hear that too. So thank you. That's very insightful. Quite the journey. Sandro, I'm turning to you, because eToro had, the whole of Europe as its oyster if it wanted to put a flag into any European jurisdiction to set its base. And I know that, from working alongside you throughout the process, I know that you were instrumental in getting Malta to be selected as the preferred place to be basing the e-money operations. Can you walk us through a little bit of how you feel the framework in Malta has served eToro, the approach taken by the MFSA, and how you've harnessed the possibilities offered by Malta and its regulatory framework?
Sure, and actually, I'd echo more than just what Anna was saying. I think that the pillar to all this is all the initiatives that Malta is doing towards fintech. Andrew mentioned some of those initiatives and some of the entities that are set up in order to make sure that we have a stabilized framework. But more than anything, the MFSA has played a very big role. And it's not only with the eToro process, but also, as you know, other entities that I have had set up over here and licensed over here.
Yeah.
And it's very clear, throughout the years, and I've seen this personally, that the regulator has been very approachable, has always been willing to listen, to understand the business model, and as much as innovation is there, the guys on the regulatory side are willing to listen, understand, and see that stuff is being done appropriately, and rather than just closing the door, opening up and making sure that the right questions are asked, making sure that at the end of the day, all the regulatory framework is well adhered to, that you're running in compliance to all the financial services, and it's very clear that what they're after is security towards the customers, towards the clients. But at the end of the day, the company, whichever the company is making sure that the clients are the forefront and they're safe. But I can clearly state, that they're embracing the market needs. Even recently, they have set up, a fintech sector. So they're actually, putting the banking sector on one side and the fintech sector on another side. Hence, putting more process, more assessment into, what's happening in the world, which is digitization. And I believe Alan mentioned it earlier, the new sandbox model, which is there to attract and invite new and upcoming startups. I think all these things put together just, add to the attractiveness of the island. But more than anything is the approachness, right? So the fact that you can actually sit down with the regulator, discuss, and find ways to help ensure that the business you're running is run in the right way, and they're willing to listen and to help you actually go towards that.
Thank you. No, thanks. It is really does reflect the approach that the MFSA has taken throughout the years. I mean, Malta has clearly punched above its weight in attracting financial institutions, so electronic money institutions, payment service providers, to operate from Malta, to base themselves here. And I think it's precisely because of the accessibility of the regulator, in the sense that there's always going to be regulatory issues that need to be addressed, approached in a way. When you're going into innovation, there are certain lines which aren't entirely clear, and the fact that you have a regulator to approach, at short notice, within a couple of weeks, you could be organizing a meeting with the regulator to be able to discuss those difficulties. I think that is really, really valuable, and we've got that feedback from several people that we deal with, through the process. But jumping into something else, and so we were looking at, okay, your journey and how the regulatory framework has worked for you so far. How do you see, and Sandro, maybe I'll start with you, your vision of how the payments landscape is unfolding, in the foreseeable future, and where you are seeing, the biggest movements, the biggest prospects for growth, especially within the wider model that you said.
I would start, Andrew, when looking at that, right? So, what's happening on the market, what's going on, and the pace it's moving. I think probably I could say that's probably one of the main reasons why I'm driven to the industry. It's all these fast-paced changes, happening all the time, with all those blocks that you need to put together, and this is all there to tie up the new services that are required for the consumers. At least from my end, I see it as never ending, right? It's always evolving, it's one disruption literally disrupting another, right? So it's absolutely great. It's alive.
Where are you seeing the main drivers for your business at the moment? Where do you think, that you are looking, or where is eToro looking at the moment as areas for growth, especially in the payment space?
Well, I would say in general in the payment space, it's all going towards digitalization. The fact that your phone is taking everything, call it the one central place where everything is happening, from peer-to-peer payments to your IBAN to your multiple bank accounts all being in one place. Look at sort of the open banking initiative. Look at other initiatives that are happening. Payments on blockchain. That in turn, by the way, brings other issues, like both from a compliance regulatory aspect, the risk fraud, which is always increasing with all this new evolvement that's happening. but it also brings new ways of customer acquisition, and retention as well. So the way we used to do business yesterday doesn't mean we're going to do it tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But the whole infrastructure and technological advancement is just impressive. I mean, you name it, you just have everything in one place. You have access on the flick of a button of transferring money, receiving money, in any way, shape, or form nowadays. So I think that's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sandro. How about you, Alan? Where are you seeing? I mean, again, being a model which is more focused on building up more of a consumer base in Malta, but even looking beyond there. As you said, you passported into Europe, so you're obviously looking beyond the shores of Malta's perhaps limited market to be able to grow. Where are you seeing the biggest opportunities at the moment from where you're sitting?
Yes, opportunities. First of all, just to pick on, I fully agree with Sandro on the pace. The pace is phenomenal and accelerating, and I think it's one of the challenges for fintechs. There's always a lot of opportunity, and you need to focus on, you can't focus on everything, so you really need to maintain focus and stick to your roadmap. Also, to build on what Sandro was saying about the phones. I mean, I recently went on a trip to Singapore, and I didn't use a penny. I didn't use one Singaporean dollar. Yeah, I just literally use my watch, not even my phone, my watch, all the way. Tokenization is, increasing at a very, very, very fast pace. Obviously through the main wallets as well, Google Pay and Apple Pay. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with Apple if they open up their wallet to allow fintechs to use the NFC chip. There is, cash is very much present in society, but it's up until 2030, it's set to double. Digital payments are going to double or triple. So again, the volumes are growing and the adoption is growing, and COVID obviously really accelerated that. Then there are sort of the evolutions, like for example, SEPA payments, which sort of eventually SEPA Instant is going to be, SEPA Instant is going to, like UK faster payments, it's going to be mandatory, SEPA Instant eventually, and then that's going to continue evolving. So we're really looking forward to that, because obviously it provides a great customer experience and having to wait a whole day or more for a transfer. There's cross-border payments that is going to keep on evolving over there. We'll maybe possibly touch about on the blockchain later. Currently, it's quite inefficient the way it is through SWIFT. There's mobile technology that's going to continue evolving for businesses. So far, we've been talking more about consumer, but businesses are demanding embedded finance, and we're seeing it as a huge opportunity. So if I had to answer your question, I would say there's a huge opportunity to serve businesses who are demanding the same efficiency as consumers are getting at the moment, and also offering those services even on mobile. And then, something more forward-looking would be something like, central bank issuing digital currencies. But that's more of the in the long term evolution of payments, let's say.
Yeah. Well, long term, and maybe not so long term, because even in terms of the new regulations that are coming through the European Union, it seems that there's been a massive effort at trying to protect, digital euro and all of that. So MiCA may have, one of the drivers of MiCA was also to do that. So I think we should be watching this very closely.
I think what's in it for the central banks when considering to issue digital currencies themselves, you would obviously not have the fluctuation that you have on cryptocurrencies, although now there are stable coins that are trying to address that. But also there is a trail, so it helps with tax evasion, it helps with the fight against money laundering and so on. So there are benefits as well for central banks to do that. But I think it's early days, so that is one of my, much longer predictions, so to speak.
Pipe dreams, exactly. Maybe pipe dreams. As you're saying, the consumer side of it, I mean, the buy now, pay later, which seems to be, we were talking about embedded finance. So I think the opportunities that are available still for payment services to be taken up a notch and to be harmonized in the way that they are structured and available to operators to be able to roll out. I think that's going to be quite an interesting space. But we'll talk about PSD3 later, see how that seems to be unfolding and what your wish list will be. We mentioned some of the challenges, and maybe challenges bring opportunities. So I don't know in what order where we addressed it. We looked at kind of what the future is looking like. Where do you see the biggest challenges? I mean, not to cast a dark, heavy shadow over operations, but business is about overcoming challenges and overcoming them, successfully with creativity and with an innovative mindset. Where do you see the biggest challenges at the moment that you work very hard to overcome? San, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I was actually, when I was discussing earlier, probably I was touching base also on a few of those, because, there are challenges, obviously, with all this fast-paced movement, and I would say stuff that keeps me up at night, is fraud and security risks. I mean, fraud is very prevalent, and they're always trying to find ways how to come up with something new on how to attack any system or any party whatsoever. Then there is the separation of the compliance and regulatory challenges. We have a wide range of regulations, and we need to make sure that we're completely adhering to it at all times. So that is stuff that is always required to be reviewed and ensured. But apart from that, I would also say it's third-party reliance. We in the payment space, you have reliance with third parties, at least at this point in time. We do, be it banking partners, be it any critical physical partners that are building the blocks, in order to make that payment service work. And I would say that is a challenge, because at any given point in time, there are a few points of failure that could happen, that could impact the business in a negative way.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And don't let it keep you too much up at night too much. Just share your problem. A problem shared is a problem half solved. And when it comes to regulation, clearly what is one man's pain is another man's pleasure. Regulation for lawyers tends to keep us busy. But yes, it is coming through thick and fast. Have you had the same experience, Alan, in terms of difficulties? Fraud is clearly a very sensitive and complicated area, because, as Sandra was saying, the innovative ways that cyber criminals find to be able to hack a system are becoming more sophisticated every day. But beyond that, beyond the fraud and beyond the security issues, where do you feel that you spend most time thinking creatively about how you're going to overcome the challenges that you face?
First of all, I think sort of when you're talking about regulation, fraud, they're a big part of what we do every day. It's continuously evolving. So let's talk about AML for a second. AML, it's not like you're developing systems or procedures and they're just there. They're continuously being updated, and you're continuously closing and improving and whatever. And at the same time, you need to make the experience for the customer as seamless and frictionless as possible. So the challenge is obviously to adopt the regulation to protect the company, but at the same time, not to make it a massive burden on the client. So there's a lot of effort there continuously to be able to continue to, follow, to get the highest standards, but at the same time, to make sure that you implement it in a friendly way for the end consumer. So over there, a lot of effort is being done consistently. Regulation is coming in all the time, be it on cross-border VAT payments, be it on new reporting. It's just, so regulation is definitely a chunk of what we do, and it's something that we sort of practically embrace, because if you're intelligent about it, you actually can create a competitive advantage. And if you're not good at it, you end up, being a legacy bank that just doesn't know, just cannot handle the volume, and is therefore providing like a really bad service. Let's also take DORA. Let's talk about DORA for a second. I really welcome DORA. It's one of the few that, normally when a new regulation comes out, it can be honest, and you're like, okay. But DORA is actually something really positive, I think, for the industry, because as we're mentioning, fraud, cybercrime is on the increase, and I believe that it's very healthy for the industry to set standards, to set a minimal standard, and really to address this, so that the industry can across Europe can continue to grow as a whole. So personally, I've seen nothing extreme in DORA. I think it's very reasonable, and I think it's very important. So not all regulation is a challenge. And then another challenge for every fintech, as I said in the beginning, is to choose to make sure you focus on. There's always a lot of opportunity, and you really need to focus on delivering what's most important. Because it's very easy to get lost with, like as Sandro said, the agility and the pace and the innovation that's going on. It's very easy to lose focus and lose your way. So I think fintechs need to keep the focus and diversify their revenue streams.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for that insight too. We're coming up to the half hour, and I wanted just to encourage our audience that if they have any questions to put to the panel, then by all means, please do pass them on so that we can tackle a few questions. In the last 10-15 minutes of the webinar, we'll be able to address any direct burning questions that you may have. So please do come forward with them. So just to again pick up on the discussion of the future, what lies ahead. We know where we're standing, but it's always we look down the barrel of time with some trepidation. So blockchain, much has been said about blockchain technologies. So apart from cryptocurrencies themselves, which we can also talk about, blockchain has been hailed as potentially a technology that would revolutionize the industry, the payment services industry, if the speeds at which it can process transactions increases, because currently the speeds that we see will not be sufficient to keep up with the demands being placed on it in a typical payment service environment. And even smart contracts perhaps gaining traction, having been being coded contracts, which will be able to trigger off the event of a payment upon the satisfaction of certain conditions. Now, to the extent that you as organizations are keeping your eyes open on these technologies and evaluating how it's evolving to be able to integrate them into your system. I mean, can we talk a little bit about are you looking at blockchain technologies? Are you looking at smart contracts? What is the general feeling within your organizations about how this could potentially impact, or the application uses that we could find? I mean, Sandro, maybe we'll start with you on this.
Yeah, sure. And you rightly pointed it out, right? I mean, blockchain is a technology that is ever evolving, and the more we go, the more we see uses to it. It's basically providing speed, lower lower cost, less intermediaries. That means there's less points of failure, there's more autonomy, there's more transparency as well. So I believe that blockchain is something that in the future will increase, and it will be disruptive in itself. It will be possibly a better way of transactions. You can say that the payment service might be revolutionized by this technology, because then tying that with smart contracts, which offers a faster, more effective payment solution, and in essence just brings the end product to the consumer in a better way, possibly. But this affects various parts of the payment services, right? You have cross-border payments, for example, peer-to-peer payments, micropayments, and these all can flow much smoother, faster, and just work all on the blockchain technology. And hopefully in soon to come, we'll be seeing a lot of this. There's already a couple of parties that are doing remittances on blockchain, and that has been evolving throughout the years with even banks, by the way, plugging into the network, which in turn, that is taking part of the business from the SWIFT network, and moving it onto the blockchain. But it also provides transparency, as I was saying earlier, and exactly from beginning to end, from where the payment initiated to where it's being terminated. It's all open, it's all available, which I believe Alan mentioned it earlier, will also provide to, less abuse, less possibilities of money laundering or stuff of the sort, right? So it's a technology that in itself, I believe will also be good to provide more transparency, not only for the end user, but also for the regulatory sphere, and to adhere to actually licensing conditions and requirements throughout.
Thank you, San. That's interesting to get a bit of a peek into the future. Alan, do you kind of share this view on the role of these technologies within payment services, or are you follow? I know you're following this very closely on a personal level, but how do you see this integrate with your business model in the medium term?
No, I fully agree. Fully agree, because the SWIFT network is not efficient. It's unacceptable that you need to send money. It takes days. It's really obvious nowadays that something needs to be done. So it takes days. It can get lost. You need to send a tracer. That creates works for the banks, for the payment services, and so on. So it's hopping between many banks to arrive to its final destination, whereas the blockchain is direct. You are what the model that they're talking about at the moment is they are ramping. You're getting euro. You're converting it to a stable coin, sending it across, and then converting it back to euro. For that to happen, though, I mean, let's keep our feet on the ground. It's easier said than done for it to be, in the mainstream, and we need to see regulation across globally. Not even just MiCA, which is great, and maybe we can touch upon, but we need to see regulation in the US, especially really tight, much tighter regulation, so that there isn't, first of all, there isn't a negative, or a risky aura around blockchain/crypto. So that needs to be removed, and there needs to be full trust and transparency, and full audit trail and full KYC, so that once we tick all those boxes, then we can see, the old models being phased out slowly. But I believe that we're far away from that. We've seen some developments in the US recently, so I believe that we still need much more regulation and standardization globally for the blockchain to really take off. But obviously these pilots are working. You can send money through Stellar or XRP, and it does work, but not widespread. The adoption is not widespread.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I mean, it's a conversation that you can have an hour webinar on this alone, about the exponential speed at which technologies develop. And I suppose even though the existing technologies will not be able to cope with the speeds of transactions demands that we currently see, I think it's a matter of time. It's a matter of a couple of years, a few years, until maybe those speeds pick up. But you did also touch upon MiCA, and I think it is interesting to maybe, let's take a little bit of this this digression into MiCA, which still remains central to how fintech could be underpinned. Because I agree, MiCA's development, MiCA's introduction, when it sees the light of day, because it's still going through iterations of being amended, will certainly serve to attribute public faith to crypto assets generally. And I agree, once public faith is attributed, so once there's regulation and we're seeing compliant regulation, then consumers should feel that it's good, clean and wholesome to get involved in, to invest or to dabble in these sorts of investments. But do you see a demand from the fact that you're both also involved in the investment services space? Do you see that crypto is increasingly becoming a focal part, a critical part of people's portfolio structuring, at least in the younger generations? How are you seeing this pick up as an asset class in its own right? And what trends are you seeing, basically? Alan, maybe you want to start from your end.
Definitely, there are the younger generation are buying crypto. We cannot deny it, but we also have seen the performance of crypto. So it's only a small percentage, in my view, of one's wealth. Let's put it that way. I think that we need to take off first the consumer protection completely. We need to put the banks at ease, and in the long term we'll all benefit. And more than just trading, because trading, there is, and I'm sure Sandro will confirm, because eToro are doing that actively. There is a lot of there is interest. People are trading crypto, but I think there's more use than just trading. But I think that from our side, we're not really seeing it yet because of these things I mentioned. So I think we are
still at the cusp of seeing that development there take off, clearly. Sandro, what is your view on crypto generally and the way it's sort of ramping up as an asset class? It's all right.
Well, I mean, to start off, so first of all, I'm not really onto the trading part of the business, so I can't really discuss on that side, but I can discuss on the personal side and other companies which I see trends, and basically the trends on other businesses and myself. Crypto is, a commodity that's there to stay. We're seeing, across the board in some other companies, that, people are, staying in for the long term, even though there's a lot of fluctuations in price. But the reality is this, and I agree completely with Alan, that we need proper regulation that will give more consumer confidence, that will provide, people to trust in this new methodology of payment, right? For them to actually be able to go and start using that method. But that said, then there's the stable coins, right, which are gaining traction. We see it even in other industries, because stable coins are being used as well for trading on business to business, rather than just a trading commodity. But yeah, I guess, look, at this point, once there is proper regulation and things are stabilized in an appropriate manner, I believe crypto's here to stay, and it will just grow.
Yeah, no, clearly it has evolved into something that people dismissed as being just a figment of someone's imagination or something real. You're going to add something, Alan, to that?
If I may say as well, I fully agree that it's here to stay. More and more now with Mika. I think Mika's really a step in the right direction. Malta, it has to be said that Malta was one of the first countries in the world, if not the first country, to really generate proper legislation, fully encompassing, really thorough legislation on crypto assets. And in fact, with MiCA, which is basically market and crypto assets, EU harmonization is going to put everyone on a level playing field, because now all the service providers are going to be subject to the same rules. So the blockchain space within Europe and crypto within Europe is set to flourish, definitely. So we're looking at it at a European level. This framework, which is, I think, is going to come out, I don't know, it's quite, I think it's 2025 or 26, it starts to pop through several stages. I think it's about 18 months from now. But once it's in, all the providers are on the same level playing field. There's consumer protection, and I think the word is we have legal certainty. So once we have that, then we can start seeing, the smart contract adoption and all that. And once again, Malta is at the forefront of all this, because it already has a proper legal framework. It actually has to downgrade it a bit because Malta was very cautious when implementing it, so we made it quite strict. And now at EU level, it's going to be a bit less strict, so some of the obligations are going to be actually removed. And the companies that are already licensed in Malta will, on the day that MiCA is launched, automatically, be transposed then to MiCA. So for companies that are already licensed in Malta, this is a plus.
Yeah, and passport rights apply and happy days. So they'll be able to extend.
Exactly. I mean, I think one has to say, because we talked about cross-border, but in Europe, there's a lot of positivity. And this is really a step in the right direction, also because we want to avoid what happened in the US, through lack of regulation and what happened to the FTX and so on. So we want to make sure that in Europe, this cannot happen.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It is interesting to see how things are unfolding and the speed at which they're unfolding. But yeah, this is a space to watch, definitely. So let's keep our eyes peeled for MiCA seeing the light of day after it goes to the European legislative process, and hopefully it will be sooner rather than later. Once we're on the topic of legal and regulatory developments and changes, there have been a couple of significant developments over the past months at the European level. I think one of the most material ones, in my view, was the establishment of the decision to establish a centralized European anti-money laundering authority. So that clearly sends a very clear signal to the market that Europe is going to be more coordinated in its efforts in the combat against money laundering. But another, I think, more important or more interesting development for the payment services industry specifically is the talk about PSD3. And PSD2, as you know, entered into force in 2018. It was intended to transform the perhaps the status quo, the stillness of the payments industry in Europe at the time. And I don't know whether it's fair to say that it perhaps fell short of its initial ambitions to some extent, even in regard to open banking. We're talking about PSD3, how it promises to introduce some wide sweeping reforms. What is on your particular wish list for PSD3? If you had to, dream up, we're saying, what keeps you up at night? Now think about a night where you're sleeping very deeply. What do you dream of in PSD3? I don't know. Sandro, we'll start from you.
I mean, first of all, I don't dream about PSD3, but I get to think about it. I've got other dreams going on, but nonetheless. But look, the reality is this. I mean, PSD2 was entered into force. It's 2018, if I'm not mistaken. There were a lot of expectations, from it, and to be honest, it worked. It's worked to a certain extent, But I think what PSD3 doing, it's grabbing, what were the shortfalls of PSD2, and what needs to be amended in order to address certain things based on the current, new initiatives, new technologies, and trying to put them into force. So, the first one was greater consumer protection, right? So PSD3 is going to address that. I mean, it's going to, make sure that there's, fair competition on the market, but also ensuring that there's less fraud, by introducing certain factors that will protect the consumer at the end of the day. There's a notion of improved interoperability between the systems, right? So it's going to make sure that on a competitive level, everyone's the same. There's going to be streamlined processes, which, by the way, is a breath of fresh air, right, for anyone in the industry. But also, it's going to start addressing factors from open banking, or the challenges from cross-border payments. I just, I really embrace the changes within PSD3, and I really think, doing this is happening in the right fashion. It would have been nice to see it happen even earlier, or maybe to address them in a step-by-step change. But it's welcome with open arms, to these changes, because I think it's going to bring us in a better place, both from a consumer perspective, but also from a provider. So yeah, that's what I would have to say on that.
Thank you. So you do think about it even when you're not dreaming about it. Alan, how do you think that PSD3 should unfold in an ideal way?
First of all, PSD2 was a step in the right direction. So it might have not achieved everything it wanted to achieve, definitely not, but it definitely was a step in the right direction. So, first of all, I mean, when it comes to open banking, yes, we know there are areas that need improvements. The way that certain banks have implemented it have created friction for users, and now PSD3 should address those. They're already addressing those to make sure that there is obviously sufficient security, the experience of open banking is more seamless for the client, so that it will increase adoption. I won't be technical about it, but there are a lot of tweaks that will help with that. There's also talk, I was reading, of actually merging the Electronic Money Directive with PSD3 together, which is interesting, and it will further harmonize over there during de-risking, and especially this is very interesting for FIs. Again, nothing is set in stone on PSD3, so if you read articles, you'll see, what's being talked about, what the main themes are, but we don't have anything official. There is also talk about, for example, protecting fintechs and protecting financial institutions, because when banks pass through a de-risking process, they could potentially close, first of all, because, for the listeners, a financial institution is obviously not a bank. It needs to hold money with a bank, and therefore PSD3, which is why the fintechs don't have to worry about the banking crisis and the treasury management, because they're not lending client money, as opposed to banks for obviously leveraging that. So in PSD3 there is talk about protecting fintechs from when if a bank closes an account of a fintech, they have to give a valid reason. They can't just close it as a de-risking exercise. Either the fintech would have been in breach of regulation, or there are a number of serious issues. So that's further. It seems that we're going to stay down the course of fintechs holding money with banks, which makes sense, but at the same time protecting the same fintechs from having their accounts closed, and as a result of that, obviously the clients being stuck in the middle. And last but not least, there's the BNP Buy Now Pay Later regulation that obviously again would be great, because it would put everyone on a level playing field. And if you read as well, there's also now talk about save now and pay later. So there are different Buy Now Pay Later is evolving, and there's going to be the fact that we start with a base on regulation, I think is going to be beneficial for the consumer, but also for the players in the market, so that there are no gray areas, and everyone knows what how we should tackle this.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I hope Santa's going to be generous then in his rolling out of PSD3, so he'll get many of these that you've hit on your list. Listen, time is rolling on, and we've got like 5 minutes to the hour. And we have received a few questions from our audience, which I would like to pick up. There's a few, but I want to just sort of throw two of them specifically out, which I think we can address here and now. One of them is relating to cyber risks and what steps Malta has taken to address cyber security risks in the fintech industry and how they are working with companies to mitigate these risks. Now, obviously, as a practitioner in the area and even advising companies like yourselves and even other operators in the space, there clearly has been a very strong drive by the MFSA to conduct thematic reviews. Where they've conducted thematic reviews, they've reached out to the market, they've made an emphasis on the importance of having cybersecurity even brought up at board meetings to be addressed regularly, to be discussed and tackled by the appropriate technical people. I mean, I'm not going to pick who's going to answer this question, but have you had any experience in dealing with these requests with the MFSA, and is there any enlightenment you can add to our listeners from an operator's perspective on cybersecurity? Who'd like to take this question?
As you wish.
Yeah, let's go Bob. Let's go Bob. Yeah. Start, Sand, and then we'll go over to Alan.
No, Alan wants to go for it. Go for it, Alan.
No,
okay, Alan. We're auctioning it off. Al, go for your experience. I know that you've been doing a lot of focus on
the MFSA has, I mean, it revolves around DORA. So the MFSA has organized webinars on DORA. They've been very communicative about DORA. They've set timelines. There's a plan, and cybersecurity is, part and parcel of DORA, the way I see it, because you need to extend DORA, to your cybersecurity efforts and make sure that you're keeping all your client data safe and all the other requirements. So I think we're doing a lot, and we're recognizing it. We're recognizing the importance of it, which, as I said before, is extremely important. So I think the regulator is being proactive in this respect, and I'm sure Sandra will agree.
I think constructive is a fair comment to say. They have been constructive in the sense that they have been giving feedback and working with operators to understand, how certain risks can be mitigated through better systems, better regulation. I find that they listen to understand operators' problems before they.
The Malta Chamber of SMEs is organizing meetings with the MFSA to address any concerns, for maybe smaller players that don't have maybe the setup and so on, because not necessarily fintechs. I think the fintechs are the best placed because they're really quite high tech and they've already got sort of everything set up quite robustly. But there are cybersecurity doesn't only affect fintechs; it affects banks that maybe have very little set up compared to security setup. It affects investment services firms. It affects a lot of firms and thousands of firms. So I would, let's say, some are better placed than others, but I think everybody's recognizing the importance of it.
Yeah. And San, do you want to add anything to that, to what Alan's highlighted?
No, I'm agreeing with Alan, and indeed, the fact that the MFSA is, pushing us as operators, to always keep aligned, look into the DORA, what's happening, what's changing, and making sure that, we're on the ball. I think that's a great thing to begin with. So I have nothing to add on to that.
Thank you. Thanks. And I think I'm going to put the second question to you, more in your capacity as being involved on the board of Finance Malta, which is the sort of industry peer group to develop Maltese strategy in the financial services industry. One member of our audience is asking, what is the long-term vision of the fintech industry in Malta, and how does it align with the country's broader economic goals? I mean, is there some insight you can give us from your involvement in Finance Malta and how you see fintech becoming an increasingly more significant component of that strategic, of those strategic economic goals?
I mean, this is when the MFSA launched a strategy document, which can be downloaded from Finance Malta website. There is clear commitment to fintech and Malta growing as an international fintech hub, which in itself means that the government recognizes the potential, but also the importance of financial services at large and growing that. And this is a strategic document. It's something that was not, it was an extensive document that was, roped in people from all over, from all the various industries and all the top people. So, and it took years, quite a couple of years to complete. So this is something that's really well thought out. And there is clear commitment to grow the industry, and it also describes how. So, I mean, I've got it open in front of me. There's mention of setting up a fintech task force, for example. So a team that is focused on bringing the government, the regulator, the service provider, industry, and startups together to define and develop the strategic direction. There is talk about venture capital and venture funding and how they're going to do that. So I would encourage you to download this document. It's open for all to see, and you can look at all the detail over there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And in fact, as you say, it has been the fruits of about three years' work, which has gone into the strategic thinking of how Malta should shape its strategy. And now it's the time for action to see how those steps are going to be implemented across.
And what was mentioned also at the launch was that this is not, set in stone. This is a document that's alive and going to continue evolving. So they didn't do all that work. So now it becomes something that's stagnant. It's going to be kept alive. There's going to be teams, and it's going to continue to develop across time.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Listen, I would love to continue this conversation. It's really been interesting to get your insights onto various aspects of Malta, its a regulatory framework, and how your businesses in the payment services sector have availed themselves of that framework. I'm going to have to wrap up and thank you both for accepting the invitation, for being such active contributors to this discussion. And thank all our attendees for making the time to follow this discussion. Thank you to Mondak for organizing it. I wish you all a nice afternoon, morning, wherever you're sitting. So thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.